Domo, what is up, everybody? Steady here, official Jujutsu Kaisen translator, and we are here for another week of Jujutsu Kaisen Manga Lounge. We've got Shibuya Incident Part 37, which is Chapter 119. Of course, as always, I hope you've got something to drink, maybe a little bit of a snack ready. I totally would be snacking too, but then I can't talk, right? So, but I've gotten some comments about people kind of making it a weekly thing, just to kind of grab a nice drink and a snack or something like that and just sit back for about 15 minutes or so. And that's really what I was kind of hoping that this was going to be, and kind of get a little bit of a discussion going in the comments and all that. And with that, of course, thank you very much for all of you that do spread that positive juju with a like and a comment. And I know some people have been sharing it with their friends and stuff too, which is really cool. It's nice to see the Jujutsu Kaisen community kind of grow and a lot more people getting their eyes on the best series in Shonen Jump, right? But of course, as well, I've got a yet to be released Volume 6 in English right here. Volume 5 just came out as well, so but I have all the links for the pre-orders available in the description. Definitely, I think Volume 6 should be coming out in another month or so, but I was lucky enough to get an advanced copy. But anyways, there's a lot of action, a lot of stuff to talk about this week, and definitely a keyword that we're going to be talking about is consequences. So I want you to kind of keep that in mind as we're discussing this week's Jujutsu Kaisen Manga Lounge, Chapter 119 incoming. Here we go. So of course last week we left off with the awesome fight between Mahoraga and Sukuna, just kind of like almost like a Dragon Ball levels of, people flying everywhere through buildings and all that kind of stuff, which we don't really see too much in Jujutsu Kaisen, right? But when you're talking about like people like Gojo and Sukuna and stuff, all of a sudden, a little bit of hand-to-hand becomes something much greater. But we start out with this amazing little page here, opening up with these two kind of cooking knives almost, right? And this is definitely something that has been kind of going around the grapevine for a while now, and I've kind of noticed it as well, but especially with this, that there seems to be kind of almost a cooking theme with Sukuna and some of his powers, of course, here with the slashes and even the fact that he's able to manipulate fire. Perhaps is a little bit of hint that there is kind of this theme, right? A lot of the kind of curse techniques and stuff have to do with themes. Like Gojo, for example, is very kind of mathematical in his abilities, for example, or concepts thereof, anyways. But this is just kind of all conjecture, theory. I still think that Sukuna definitely has a lot to do with poisons and things like that, and I don't know, maybe there is going to be kind of a tie-in with that, with the cooking thing, I don't know, but we'll see. But anyways, so they do talk about how Sukuna has actually has two distinct styles of slashes, one being Dismantle, which is the default, they describe it as the default version is Dismantle, but apparently he can also manipulate it in a way where the other one we went with Cleave, which Cleave, the kind of the original Japanese, was the kanji for that you can typically use to like kind of fillet fish or like meat or kind of things like that, sabaku. So we went with Cleave though, just because the description of it was very much appropriate in the sense that in the Japanese to describe it as kind of this really intense, like one slash, like you can adjust the levels for kind of harder enemies and things like that. And I think Cleave really does represent that concept well. And it's kind of, I will say though, as we see in the chapter, and hopefully this will be kind of expanded on later on, and I'm sure we will get that, but definitely it's hard to tell at the moment, if I'm honest. Maybe you can correct me or kind of give me your opinions on it, but it's hard to kind of dismantle from cleave. Later on, there is that moment, of course, the big WTF moment in the chapter, where theoretically we're seeing both, but it's hard to tell. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But we're immediately kind of follow that up on page 2, and I had an absolute blast. It was so awesome, like reading this in Japanese, and I did my best to kind of give it justice. It was so kind of poetic. Of course, a lot of Jujutsu Kaisen, Akutami Sensei has expressed their kind of inspiration with Togashi Sensei and things like that. And we've seen that in Hunter x Hunter, where a lot of the kind of narration, kind of third-person narration, is kind of very poetic and very like grandiose, right? And we definitely get that here. So I'm just going to kind of read it off because it just kind of excites me so much. It says, Malevolent Shrine differs from other types of domain expansions in that it doesn't create a separate space using a barrier. So what we know of domain expansion, what we've seen of it before, even with Unlimited Void, for example, there's always this kind of bubble, right? This kind of barrier, even when, like Mahito uses his, for example, it's, we see that bubble and we see Yuji trying to break in, right? But Malevolent Shrine is distinctly different than that it doesn't use this kind of barrier. And the way that they describe it here, the ability to realize one's innate domain without using a barrier is akin to an artist painting a masterpiece not on a canvas, but on air. A truly divine technique. I just love this so much, and I think I did it justice, hopefully, with kind of bringing that kind of poetic nature to the narration here, and just this 2-page spread, and just even the angle kind of like looking up, obviously, Sukuna very much, looking down on the peon, so I kind of like the way that the angle is kind of looking up at him like he is a divine being, right? So they do expand on this on page 4, saying that furthermore, by allowing an escape route, a binding vow is formed, which vastly increases the guaranteed hit's effective area. Of course, the guaranteed hit, the concept with domain expansions, that once you're in someone's domain expansion, there is always this idea of the guaranteed hit, right? We saw it with Dagon and the fish, for example. We saw it with Jogo and kind of like these embers flying at Yuji and Gojo, right? But with the concept of allowing an escape route, remember, this whole idea of the binding vow is something that we've seen continuously and very distinct about Jujutsu Kaisen, that there's always this kind of give and take, right? So that's the best way I can describe the binding vow, the give and take. So by giving up this barrier to keep the enemy inside, the returns are so great that you can effectively just make this area of the guaranteed hit so vast. And it's a maximum radius of nearly 200 meters, which is crazy. That's a radius of 200 meters, so 400 meters across, right? You guys are smart. You don't need me to tell you that, but just in case. And then they kind of go on here saying that taking Megumi Fushiguro into account, and I like how they, have this little map here going on. Sukuna narrowed the effects range to a 140 meter radius above the surface. So it does almost kind of give the idea that perhaps it's not just a circle, but almost a sphere, right? But the way that Sukuna used it here, that he's only using it above surface and everything within kind of like a 140 meter radius. So that's still a very, very big circle, though. 280 meters across, that's you're talking about like a stadium size. So it's pretty intense. And on page 5, when I first saw this page, I was like, whoa, that's some crazy slashing action there, right? But it's actually ki, and then small tsu, ki, which is kind of like a effect that you would have with like a slashing sound. So I like what Akutami Sensei did here. It's really cool that they use the sound effects almost as a design to represent the slashes. It's so cool. Maybe a little kind of fun fact that that English only readers might not catch. But and then of course, so we know this is some serious bad news. And they of course represent this kind of idea with flashing to. Remember, we had that little note, I think it was 3 or 4 chapters ago, that Panda was saying, Toge moved all the civilians to kind of like a corner of the bubble, so they're out of at least danger or whatever, right? But they couldn't get them out of the bubble, but at least they're kind of kept somewhere safe, assumingly inside like maybe a building or a basement somewhere or something like that, right? But it says, how's your phone? No, still no reception. And then, they're kind of talking here. And then the girl's saying, oh, it's okay. We got that megaphone guy. And then on page 7, this is like, this is so like intense. And this is what I mean by kind of the consequences here now, right? And this is also where I wanted to kind of talk quickly about what I was saying about how I am having a little bit of trouble anyways as far as it's represented here. But the original Japanese, I double triple checked it, said for anything with cursed energy within range, cleave, and for inanimate objects, dismantle. And although there was that description on the first page, it's still kind of hard to tell what that really means, right? Because it says the default / dismantle, but we don't really even know what that really means. Like, but the way that cleave was described was almost this kind of like just one fell swoop, right? But so if we're assuming anything with cursed energy, if we're to take the top frame here, it would be the people are the ones with cursed energy, right? Even people, all people have cursed energy. It's just whether they are able to harness it, use it in jutsu and whatnot, right? That's where cursed energy comes from people, and then it starts to kind of manifest onto buildings and things like that. So maybe it does look like the humans and like the little suit in the back, for example, are kind of getting the same effect. So maybe we are to assume that the kind of the suits and kind of like the room and stuff also have cursed energy as well, and they're all being hit with cleave. And then for inanimate objects, dismantle. Again, I could blabber on about like how I don't and sort of do and sort of don't get it, but I'll leave it at that. Maybe someone smarter than me will be able to figure it out, or we'll get more kind of clarification on this later on. But Sukuna on the bottom here then says, until Malevolent Shrine is gone, it will relentlessly attack all targets within its guaranteed hits effective range. So that is bad. If you are in this 280 meter across circle here, you are pretty much you're pretty much toast, right? And then this amazing double spread here on page 8 and 9. Of course, on the top side we have Mahoraga just getting relentlessly attacked, and then on the bottom just we see the bigger effect of it, right? Spreading out into the buildings, of course, the people and everything else that's in there. So it did say anything with cursed energy and any inanimate objects. So we are to kind of assume that anything within this circle is pretty much gone. It's if you're in there, whether you're a building or a person, you're pretty much donezo. We see kind of the buildings collapsing and things like that. And then, of course, what we know of Mahoraga is that he's able to adapt to any phenomenon, right? So, Sukuna, obviously a smart person, he's saying the only way to defeat Mahoraga is to slaughter it with a new attack before it can adapt. Basically, you have to use something new, something that Mahoraga hasn't seen before, because if you use it and he survives it, then he's already adapted to it. You can't use the same move twice, right? So, in theory, the only way you can defeat it is with a one-hit kill, basically. So that's why he says, okay, I'm using cleave, because cleave fits the criteria. He hasn't used it yet, and it's something that could potentially take it down with one hit, right? But they kind of go on to say here that if it hasn't adapted to dismantle but to slashing attacks in general, then meaning that if it's the fact that Mahoraga hasn't actually adapted to the dismantle that it got hit with earlier, but just kind of slashing attacks on a whole. Remember, because slashing attacks both involve cleave as well as dismantle. So Sukuna here is basically saying if he's adapted to slashing attacks just in general, then cleave won't work either. As we see here on the next page, page 11, we see Mahoraga already starting to kind of not revive, how do you say? Heal, I guess is the easiest way. Mahoraga's regeneration. That's what it is. That's the word I was looking for. Mahoraga's regeneration would soon be complete. So that's like, okay, that's not good. So cleave didn't work either. And then, of course, we have what we saw Sukuna use against Jogo, the fire arrow thing. Boom! A lot of awesome double spreads in this chapter. Gotta say, we're treated to some seriously awesome action here. And then we just see this huge plume of fire go up. And it seems to have worked. One hit kill. As we see in the following pages here, Mahoraga's little wheel thing starts to melt, signifying that it is indeed defeated. So, of course, that does result in Ponytail Guy here being, done with the ritual, as well as Megumi should theoretically be back as well, right? And then, I love this little thing here. We finally get a description on page 16 about Ponytail Guy. We finally get a name, but I love this. It's almost kind of comedic here, right? And of course, Akutami Sensei being such a comedic genius, these little moments, they say, oh, here we finally get a name. And of course, as we know later on in the chapter, he's done, but it says curse user Haruta Shigemo's curse technique stores miracles. And I like how he's kind of thinking to himself. He's saying, yes, I survived again. My luck never runs out, right? And this is something that I've elaborated on when we first saw him fight against Nanami anyways. We saw evidence of this almost kind of like an HP bar, right? But it was actually, if you want to get really technical, yeah, it is like an HP bar, but technically speaking, it's like a miracles bar. So, but it's just another way basically of saying HP bar, that apparently it's this kind of luck meter where when it runs, anytime that Haruta is in kind of like a life-threatening situation, it depletes some of his luck and he's able to survive it. That's why we saw him get knocked out so many times by Nanami and survived. But and I don't know if this is something that they're ever going to address, but it doesn't really explain what the whole deal with the hand sword is. And I don't know if that's something that just Akutami Sensei neglected, kind of said like, oh, don't worry about that. Or I don't know if it's going to be explained later on. But anyways, the last panel here on page 16 says the markings under Shigemo's eyes show how many miracles are stored, but even he's not aware of that fact. So remember, we did see him kind of talk about like, yeah, I'm not really too sure how this works too, when he was talking to Nobara, right? So kind of elaborating on that. And then once again, I live to see another day. And then I was like, it's such an intense chapter, but I'm not gonna lie, like you're supposed to kind of laugh at this. So if you did kind of get a chuckle out of this while kind of like then that's the perfect reaction. So it's just so gruesome, right? Even Haruta doesn't know what happened. And then on page 18, I gotta say, if I'm a little proud of this line right here. It says his luck had run out. The phrase, but it fits perfectly here in his fight against Kento Nanami. So kind of reinforcing what a lot of us had thought the case might be. We saw that the markings under his thing were empty by the time he got to Fushiguro, so he was already at 0. In any other situation that puts his life on line, if theoretically it makes it sound as though if he did have a little bit of luck left, that he would have even been able to survive this encounter right here, but alas. And then we see the second panel here. We see kind of Sukuna saying not much longer. Again, this is, in case it wasn't clear, it's signifying that it's going to go back to Yuji very, very soon. Not much longer time. And then we kind of flash to Yaga Sensei here in Shoko. And then we see Fushiguro. At least Sukuna kind of... Sukuna put him there and then got away, right? So Fushiguro at least seems okay, which is good news. But then Yaga also does kind of point out the fact that he thought he saw Itadori, but was it Itadori or was it Sukuna and this and that, right? And of course we get this just heartbreaking panel at the end here. And then this is what I really wanted to, the kind of the essence, and it's a very kind of, it's a catalyst here, right? The kind of the turning point, for lack of a better phrase, SHIT just got real, right? It's certainly in terms of the bigger picture, so Sukuna used Malevolent Shrine, and then all of a sudden, this huge portion of one of the biggest hubs in the world is just leveled right now. So this is no longer just, you know, because we've always had this concept about the curtains, you know, and throwing up these bubbles so to keep civilians unaware of this whole idea of jutsu and this and that, but it's, that ship has sailed. You can't keep this under wraps anymore, right? Unless there's some sort of crazy, some person that we don't know who can essentially put like a rewind on all these things or alter memories, or I don't know, but it's still, it doesn't seem that like that's what's going to happen. So the consequences of the Shibuya incident now are not just to the Jujutsu sorcerers involved, the civilians involved. This is now an international matter, right? Which in terms of the story is of course not good in the sense that, you know, it's a lot of consequences will become of this, but as if we're talking about as fans reading the series, this does kind of allow for us to expand, saying, okay, so there's this much more content that can potentially happen now, right? So that's at least one sign that perhaps we'll be still getting a lot of Jujutsu Kaisen to come, which is good in that sense, but also as represented by Yuji's face here as well, he is aware of the situation of what's going on, everything that Sukuna has done, everything, you know, he killed the twins, he killed all these people in the Malevolent Shrine circle. Who else? You know, he killed Haruta. I don't know if he really cares about the ponytail guy, but he's seeing all of this. And he's aware of all of this. And of course, we know Yuji and how much the struggle that he has with kind of the idea of killing people and the consequences and this and that. And as much as, of course, everyone likes Gojo and stuff, if Gojo does get out of this situation, prison realm, he's going to have to answer for it. Which is also another consequence, right? Gojo certainly was the one to kind of push the envelope in terms of keeping Yuji alive, thus keeping Sukuna alive. And of course, as fans of the series, we read the manga and we're like, well, yeah, that's the right thing to do. We got to keep Yuji alive. Of course, there wouldn't be a manga if he didn't do that. But, you know, we had people like Principal, Gakuganji, and a lot of the kind of higher ups saying that the threat of Sukuna is too great, that the risk is too great. And kind of the worst case scenario is coming true here. So there are going to be a lot of consequences, a lot of people having to answer for their actions as well, right? But certainly you can, the tension is very, very palpable now. The players are kind of involved in this whole Shibuya incident are kind of dropping left and right. You know, the twins are done. Gojo's kind of out of commission. Megumi seems like he's not going to be able to fight for a while. We don't know what's going on with Nanami and Naobito and Maki. We don't know where Kugisaki is. She's assumingly with Nita, but we don't know where. Panda and Sakabe Sensei are kind of course, last we saw them, they had to kind of run away from Sukuna, right? So perhaps they're around, but things are taking a very bad turn. And of course, when it comes to Shonen Jump, of course, there is this kind of idea of you have to eventually have this kind of turnaround, right? The things get bad, and then in the end, justice kind of triumphs. But I have a feeling that we're still on the down, and you can very much feel it with this chapter and this kind of last panel here, that if you thought things were bad, that I think things are only going to get worse. Sorry, I don't know why I'm talking like that, but yeah, it's as much as of course we look forward to the next chapter and things like that. It's kind of scary. It's kind of scary to think about what's going to come next. Certainly there are going to be a lot more casualties, surely. Yeah, and I just we don't know. But anyways, before I start rambling too much, let me know what you guys thought about the chapter. Of course, it was awesome, and of course, thank you very much for leaving that like and comment and all that good stuff. So it's crazy. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and we will see you next week. All right. Cheers to you. You know how we do. Mata yoroshiku. All right.